Hey there, Jordan with Status Coup. Hope you're having a good day. It is Wednesday, August 2nd, 2023, right here in the United Corporations of America. Great show. About to be joined by Professor Richard Wolff. Obviously, the big news is the Trump indictment. I don't really think I have anything to add that isn't being covered ad nauseum elsewhere. But needless to say, it will definitely play a big part in the election and the American media circus over the next 6 months to a year. We'll obviously cover it. But I did want to cover the economy because we are getting a steady diet of how wonderful things are, if you haven't noticed, from CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Democratic Party. In fairness, the Republican Party would be doing the same thing. The GDP is wonderful, I hear. Low unemployment. Wages are up, according to the know-it-alls. So I thought it would be instructive to have Professor Wolff join us to separate fact versus fiction. Please smash that like button, share this live stream. The more people that press like, the more people that will see. Joining me now is economist and Professor Richard Wolff. Definitely check out his YouTube channel, Democracy at Work. Professor Wolff, if you could stomach it, I just wanted to start with a quick montage of the steady diet of Bidenomics cheerleading coming from the usual suspects. Let's take a look.
I knew we couldn't go back to the same failed policies when I ran. So I came into office determined to change the economic direction of this country, to move from trickle-down economics to what everyone on Wall Street Journal and Financial Times began to call Bidenomics. I didn't come up with the name. I now claim it, but they're the ones that used it first. Today, the U.S. has the highest economic growth rate, leading the world economies since the pandemic, the highest in the world.
The United States is heading in the right direction. He's embracing the term Bidenomics, which is a play on Reaganomics, the president trying to claim credit for an economy where some indicators are trending in the right direction, although public optimism remains low. Biden is aiming this message squarely at the middle class.
But now, look at the economic numbers. They have all turned in a really favorable direction for President Biden. Inflation is down. It was down to 3% in June. Incomes are rising faster than prices and have been for the last 4 months. Unemployment is still at 50-year lows at 3.6%. Stock market is doing well. Instead of, Republicans had hoped that Bidenomics was something they'd be able to attack, particularly on the inflation front. And so he's leaning into it and attempting to turn what could have been a weakness into a strength and saying, this is working for you.
I'd like to see you explore why people think the economy is bad when the economic data says otherwise. You saw those poll numbers. People think it's bad.
I don't have an explanation for why people think it's bad, because objectively it is good. It's hard to imagine it could be much better. The economy is still growing. I don't know. Looks pretty good to me.
Do you think there's an element, people just like being unhappy?
People like being unhappy about a lot of things in America right now, and unfortunately.
Professor Wolff, are you and the rest just a bunch of cranks who like being unhappy?
No, I think that, let me be blunt. When President Biden, in the opening clip that you showed, said about the economic growth of the United States being the greatest in the world, that is just false. There's no nice way he could walk that back. That's not true, and it hasn't been true for the last 30 years. Let me give you an example. The economic growth expected this year, 2023, by the United States government, based on the United States government and the world system as well, estimates, will be between 1.5% and, I'll be generous, 2.25% growth of GDP 2023. The People's Republic of China will have a growth rate this year based on the same numbers, measured in the same way by the same international agencies, of between 5% and 6%. And that ratio, that Chinese economic growth, is 2 to 3 times what it is in the United States, has been true virtually every year for the last quarter of a century, which is why China is the competitor and the big new global economic powerhouse that it has become. Mr. Biden and the Democrats are doing exactly what you said. They are cherry picking economic data that make them look good. If we had a mainstream media that was up to its own self-image in terms of honesty, they would be telling you that. Here's a metaphor that will capture it. If you go to a doctor because you're having pains or you don't feel well, and if the doctor took your temperature, noticed it was 98.6, clapped you on the back and said, go home, you're fine, nothing to worry about, I hope you would be smart enough never to go see that doctor again. Why? Because to do an assessment of the human body requires looking at lots of pieces of information. That's why the medical profession has X-ray machines and blood tests and all kinds of image scanners and so on, to look at all the different parts of your body and your mind to get an overall sense. There are always some indicators that your health is in good shape, and there are always indicators that there are problems. And a decent doctor is there to tell you what, on balance, she or he thinks is your overall health. Exactly the same has to be done with the economy. If you look at the GDP numbers of one particular quarter or half a year, sure, you can find good numbers, but no one who's honest does that. You have to look at the year before, the year after, and so on, and get a sense of where things are. You have to look at other countries and see how they compare. Then you will be able to say with honesty how the United States is shaping up. Here's another one. Low unemployment is a very good thing. I applaud it. But to use it as an index, that's crazy. And let me give you a few examples of the kinds of data carefully avoided by the kinds of clips you showed. We have a terrible problem of inequality. That is, we have a growing gap between a handful of really rich people at the top, the 1%, more or less, and the vast rest. That's worse today than it was 1 year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago. In other words, it's getting worse. It's so bad that, for example, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, has made at least half a dozen speeches in the last 5-6 years, either as head of the Federal Reserve or now as Treasury Secretary, in which she expresses worry about the inequality, worry that it's getting worse, worry that the measures taken to deal with it have all failed. But she doesn't do anything about it. She just talks about it to show how concerned she is. Well, I got news for you. The inequality of a society is at least as important as the rate of unemployment or the GDP or any of the others that they have cherry-picked. The bottom line here is we have massive economic problems in the United States. If the Democrats were the out party, they'd be banging on the ceiling about all of that. But they're not. So they tell the nice, comforting story of that gentleman at the end of your clips who really can't understand what's wrong with the people. Well, besides being an insult to the intelligence of the American people, let me assure that gentleman that as a professional economist all my life, and I am far from being the only one, we have a network of economic difficulties easily matching the cherry-picked happy news that these folks are living in. It is so severe, in fact, that I would argue that we are a society that is not just falling apart in terms of the tensions between Republicans and Democrats, between pro-Trump and anti-Trump, between white supremacists and people who believe in diversity, equality, and inclusion. Here's another one. The gap between people at the top in terms of wealth and income and the vast majority is the most dangerous economic division we have. And the glad, happy talk that you just showed is a sign of how badly out of touch they are. And to add insult to the injury by telling people they don't understand their own economic condition, shame on the people who talk like that.
And I want to ask you, because something else they've been pushing is inflation is cooling, 3%. Of course, I mean, gas is not, $8 in California, but I'm on the East Coast. I'm seeing gas prices, mid $3, in some cases higher. Grocery prices still relatively high. I read a New York Times piece that said rent is finally cooling, but people, I talk to, there is real difficulty in finding a house they could afford. Wall Street are buying up homes and, putting in modest improvements and then jacking up rates. Rental prices all over the country, including in rural communities, have gone up. So what are your thoughts on, according to them, inflation is getting better? It might not be to the severity it was, but prices still seem relatively high to me.
Yes, they are high, particularly in the things that go into people's livelihoods in a major way. The inflation number is an average. If a lot of prices of things you don't buy go down, it doesn't help you. If the things that are going down in price are not what you buy, and the things going up in price are what you buy, you might get a lovely inflation number, but you, in fact, in terms of your prices, are in deep difficulty. But I don't want people to think it's just me. Let me give you some examples of others who are real worried about economic problems. On the morning of August 2nd, so we're talking right now, one of the three great companies in the world that rates the quality of the credit of every country on earth. This is an American company named Fitch Ratings. They decided on August 2nd, 2023, that the economic problems of the United States were getting worse enough that they lowered the credit rating of the United States from AAA, which is about the best you can get, nearly so, to AA plus, which is a clear notch down. That's not me. That's a conservative, big capitalist enterprise looking at the United States and saying, if you're a creditor anywhere in the world, you better think more about lending to the United States because it's riskier than it's ever been. Wow. What do you think is going on? Are they all a mystifying collection of people who don't understand what's going on? That's the job of the Fitch Corporation, to assess how well the economy is doing. They're not in the business of being Democratic Party supporters, nor for that matter, Republican Party supporters. Their job is to come up with an assessment and look at what they did. I'll give you another example, quite similar in many of its dimensions. The United States is now in a real deep competition. For the first time in the last century, the United States has a major economic competitor. Americans have to understand how the world economy has changed. 75 years ago, the middle of the 20th century, we were already at the top of the heap in this world economy, but we had potential competitors. And the most important of them were Germany and Japan. And in World War II, those competitors were destroyed by the war and by everything that happened in the war. So when the war was over, 1945 to be exact, that's 3/4 of a century ago, the United States stood absolutely alone in the world, the absolute dominant economic system. That's why the US dollar became the global currency. That's why the world order and rules of international trade were invented and imposed by the United States on everybody else, because the United States was in a position. In effect, the empire that had ruled the world economy in the 18th and 19th century, the British Empire, gave way, collapsed, and was replaced by the American Empire. And for the last 75 years, that's been the story until about 20 years ago, when something absolutely remarkable happened. One of the poorest countries on earth, China, had a revolution, 1949, and embarked on what every poor country in the world wants to do, to stop being a poor country, to become a developed, industrial, middle income, if possible, high income country, if one can dream. In most countries of Asia, Africa, and Latin America, it's been a dream, and not much more than that, for most of the last 75 years, but not in China. China is now a competitor of the United States, the likes of which we have not seen in any living person's memory. So that is a big change. And the efforts of Mr. Trump as president, trade war, tariff war, and all the rest of it, did that change anything? No, it failed. It didn't change the Chinese government, it didn't change Chinese policy, and it didn't change the extraordinary growth China achieves. Mr. Biden hinted in his race that he would have a different approach. He didn't. Either he was lying or he changed his mind. I don't know. But I know that he has continued the hostilities against China. And guess what? He's no more successful than Mr. Trump was. Okay, that's a really important point about the condition of the American economy, that it has a competitor that is equal in technology, that is equal in economic growth, that is leaving its footprint around the world. Let me give you a statistic, just one. I mean, I could literally spend all night doing it, but I'm going to give you one. The world economy is now divided between two major groups, no longer dominated by the United States. One of those groups is called the G7. It's the United States and its major allies, mostly Western Europe, plus Canada and Japan. The other major economic group in the world is called the BRICS, B-R-I-C-S, which stands for an alliance: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And that's really China and its allies. In the year 2020, 3 years ago, the GDP, the gross output of goods and services, in each of those two groups was equal. Equal. The other group produced as much in the way of goods and services as the US and its allies. Here we are 3 years later. The portion of the world's output produced by the BRICS, China and its allies, 32 to 33%. The portion of the world's output accounted for by the United States and its G7 allies, 29%. The contest is over and the US lost. Now, you can pretend from here to tomorrow. You can cherry pick data that don't let people see what I've just said. But you're playing a very dangerous game. You can do it when you're on the upswing because everybody's cheering and things are going well. That's no longer the case. So the cheering now looks and sounds as hollow and phony as it is. We're not going to solve our problems by pretending they're not there. That's not a good recipe, and shame on the Biden administration for offering such stuff to the American people rather than the hard realities and what they're going to try to do about them.
And, another thing that I think is kind of living in denial, and this isn't just Biden, this is just politicians, period. Right now, I mean, this is from CNBC, 61% of Americans say they're living paycheck to paycheck, even as inflation cools. So obviously the masses are one emergency or layoff away from disaster. And then you couple in, I think the jury is out. We're in a real climate emergency right now. We're seeing it. That is going to be an economic emergency as things get worse. And also, I think AI, it seems to me, already we're seeing through labor disputes and other things, companies are trying to make even more of a jobless utopia through AI. Can you kind of talk about these emerging threats? I mean, maybe AI could be good in certain respects, but when you got the majority are paycheck to paycheck, you got the climate emergency, which is going to create a refugee crisis and affect the economy negatively, threats to more of people's jobs. It seems like a cascading factors here that could create even more problems for the, quote, strong economy.
Absolutely. And the cascading factors are all around us. I'm not saying, we give up, gloom and doom. That's not the point. The point is face them. That's it's like going to an AA meeting. You have to face that you have a problem if you're going to make a credible effort to solve it. Pretending it isn't there, as every serious engagement with problems has taught us, is not the way to go. Let me give you an example to show you. The climate change has really affected much of the world already. And Lord knows what it's going to do in the years ahead. From the heat that is destroying large parts of the Southwest in this country and the Greek islands and so on. Here's something that would have gotten a lot more attention, but again, the political tilting and spinning make it impossible. We get lots of attention on Russians interfering in the export of grain from Ukraine. But at least as important, probably more important, is the impact of climate on India. Why? Because India is one of the greatest sources of the consumption of rice in huge parts of the world, Asia and Africa particularly, that live as their major grain on rice. India became, I believe, the 15th or 16th country over the last couple of years to forbid the export of rice or of whatever other grain a country makes, because they're so scared about the need to feed their own people that they cannot allow grain that they grow to be exported. I understand that this turn to economic nationalism is driven by the failure to deal with our climate problems and their impact on agriculture. But we're talking about hunger crises in Asia and Africa. And if those people have to spend a little bit of money they have on food, then the exports of the United States to these countries of every other kind of commodity will be hammered. This is not just to care about other people, which we should, but it's to understand we live in a world economy where all the different parts are now linked. That's what the supply chain issue taught us, or should have. We're not dealing with these problems until they hit us in the head. If Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, And I have to tell you, as I'm sure you know, that in a few weeks, 40 million Americans are going to have to start paying off their college loans, $300 to $400 a month on average. They don't have that. That's not enough money left over from the food and the rent, which have gone up so far. Who's going to fix this disaster? Answer, nobody. Nobody has fixed it to this point. The Republicans and Democrats will make economic hay as best they can for their election campaigns, but no one's really solving the problem. What do we do about the level of debt in this country? We're at the highest levels. I mean, they go up and down every year or two, but in the long run, we're at the highest levels we've ever been. And the interest rates, now that they're high, mean that as you turn over an old loan that you made 10 or 20 years ago when interest rates were zero, and you have to turn that loan over because you haven't got the money to pay it back, and you have to re-borrow for the next 5 or 10 years, you're not going to get it at zero. You're going to get it now at 4 or 5%. And the Federal Reserve dares not stop raising interest rates, because if it does, it fears a return of the inflation, which will be now on top of the one we already had. We have the greatest labor militancy we've had in a generation or two. All over the country, strikes, efforts to form unions in all kinds of places where we haven't seen that for a long time. Those people are upset. They are angry. They are suffering. They are the people who write on the poll, I'm not happy with the economy. And yet that gentleman wanted to impugn that they just want to feel bad. You know, what kind of behavior is this? The people have always been a better guide to their own financial situation than these so-called experts. So, yeah, there are all kinds of impending disasters. It would be easy for me. I don't do it because I don't believe in it, but it would be easy for me if I were the opposite side of the folks you had those clips on, to give you just an endless list of disasters already here or just down the pike from us. And you would get really depressed and upset with good reason. But that's not what an analysis is. That's what a scare tactic to sell something, a party, a candidate, a piece of equipment. I'm not in the business of doing any of that. So I'm telling you, we have an economy with very serious problems alongside certain strengths. And if we had decent leaders, then they would be busy telling us what the problems are, explaining, if they can, what they are going to really do about it, and show the kind of leadership we haven't had in this country. And we didn't need it when we were on the rise up, but we are not anymore. I know this is difficult for Americans to wrap their heads around. Our empire, like every other empire in the history of the world, goes up, hits a plateau, and then goes down. The Greek, the Roman, the Persian, the British, the Dutch, we're not that different. And we had a really good ride up for most of the 20th century. We're not going up now, folks. Somebody else is. And we better come to terms with that before it does us even more damage that we won't be able to come back from.
And I know you got to go, so real quick, can I ask you, I saw on CNBC or one of these outlets, they were talking about the UPS negotiations. The vote starts tomorrow, so workers will have 3 weeks to vote yes or no on this new contract. And they said, you know, technically good for the workers if they're going to make more, but could have inflationary effects. Isn't it a bad system if every time workers do better, corporations could just jack up prices to the umpth degree? I know, price controls, people freak out, communism, but isn't there something wrong with, media, politicians, they seem to be very worried if workers do better, that means prices will go up. Well, why can't we do something about these corporations jacking up prices whenever the workers do better?
Well, let me take advantage of your opening it up. Price controls, communism. We had price controls in this country. We had it when the president of the United States, August 15th of 1971, it's not exactly ancient history, the president at the time, a conservative Republican named Richard M. Nixon, declared a wage price freeze. No communist he, not by a long shot. And so he did that, and it was in order to stop an inflation, which it did, literally on a dime, because he made it real clear. If you're a business and you raise the price after tonight, I'm going to send the police, we're going to arrest you, and you're going to go to jail. And if you're a union and you jack up wages, same story, okay? That's a wage price freeze. You don't have to be a communist to do it. If I had time, I'd go through all the different countries in the world that have done that and have done it for the reason that it often works well. Does it always work well? No, but neither does anything else that has been used against inflations. And again, I could give you all the examples in the world that you could want for all of this. But yeah, to go to your other point, it really is disgusting when the United States government decided to spend a fortune of money sending money and weapons to Ukraine. Nobody stood up and said, wait a minute, we got an inflation if the government is suddenly throwing much money, because most of that money goes to American arms producers to pay for the arms that are given to Ukraine. Nobody worried about the inflationary impact of doing that. Why the sudden worry about inflation when you're talking about the wages that will really help the American people? Very bizarre choice. But here's the most important thing that no Republican and no Democrat will dare say out loud. Who sets prices? If you're going to answer the question, what causes an inflation? My apologies for that. What causes an inflation? You have to answer, if you're honest, prices go up. That's all an inflation means. Who sets prices in the United States? Employers, the people who own and operate businesses. In a corporation, it's the board of directors that finally makes the decision whether to raise a price, lower a price, or leave it the same. So if you're going to analyze an inflation, step one is to honestly say to the American people, inflations happen if and when employers decide to raise prices. Employers, depending on how you count, comprise somewhere between 1% and 3% of our population. They set the prices. The other 97+% of us pay the prices. So allowing an inflation means you're allowing 3%, I'll take the bigger number, of our people to determine the prices all the rest of us pay. Clue, that's not democratic, that's autocratic. Those people might as well be kings and queens setting prices. And so next question, why do the employers raise the prices? Well, let me tell you, as a professor of economics, and I've taught in business schools as well, when we teach in a business school, we explain to the students that if you run a business, if you sit on a board of directors, if you own and operate a little business, the decisions you make, whatever they are, buy this, hire that person, raise a price, you make the decision based on what it will do to your profits. Corporations decide about prices the way they do about everything else. Will it enhance my profits? Then I'll do it. Will it hurt my profits? Then I won't do it. So here's a clue. Businesses raise prices if and when it enhances their profits. But in the United States and in many other countries, the businesses aren't stupid. They can't dare say to all of us, we're raising our prices because we want to make more profits. Doesn't sound good. So you got to come up with a big fat BS. You got to tell a story that it's not your fault. Yeah, you're the employer. You set the prices, but I didn't raise them because I want to make more money. Oh, no. I raised them because, here we go, there's a supply chain disruption. The people I buy things from can't deliver them. Or it's the government's fault for flooding the economy with money. Or it's the union's fault. The workers want more money. It's always somebody's fault, but not the employer who actually has to make the decision. Otherwise, there is no inflation. Employers raise prices. Then they tell you that's not their fault, and it's not in order for them to get richer at our expense. I'm a professor. I'm here to tell you that's exactly what it is. If they could make more profits in another way, they'd be doing it. They'd be automating. That's what they're going to do with AI. They're going to bring in machines and software programs and make more money that way. And when they can do that way, then they won't bother raising prices. They won't need to. But when the other things are not quite ready yet, when the other things are not quite as good in raising their profits, well, then they'll use price increases. That's what they do. And they just don't want us to point the finger. And yet, if they don't agree to raise the prices, we don't have an inflation. Let me leave you with this thought. Is it democratic? Is it fair? Is there even an iota of justice to allow the employers of the society, 1 to 3% of our people, to be in the position of setting prices any which way they wish? And we have to live with the consequences. We have no say. We don't elect those people. We don't vote for them. We never wanted to give away the authority, because if they raise their prices, we're screwed with our incomes. If you look at that UPS vote of those workers, the Teamsters, you'll see that they've been offered a wage increase about 22% at the top. And that's very impressive until you remember that over the last 5 years, our prices have gone up about 22%. So they're doing well, but well means keeping up barely with what's going on. And if we have another bout of inflation over the years of that contract, they won't end up doing as well as they now look they might. That's the truth. We, the working people, are the takers. And the people who run this society are not just the ones who buy the politicians who tell the fancy stories. It's also they are the people who set the prices we have to pay, and we are the donkeys who go and pay those prices, grumbling and yet hesitant. And with our leaders, you'll never hear a word about it, of pointing the finger of responsibility where it belongs.
Professor Richard Wolff with Wolfonomics, much preferred over Bidenomics. Everybody check out his great YouTube channel, Democracy at Work. Thanks for taking the time today, and we'll stay in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to speak with you.
Absolutely. Don't go anywhere, folks. Got another story. Reminder, smash the like button. Reminder, tomorrow night, 7 o'clock Eastern time is the Status Coup members only call. If you are a member, you will get the Zoom link. 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific. Status Coup's monthly members call through Zoom. We take your questions, comments, concerns. I usually go for probably an hour and a half, 2 hours. Maybe I'll bring the baby on so you could say hello. That's statuscoup.com/join. Sign up as a Status Coup member today to get the Zoom link tomorrow to join our members only call. We'll also be announcing our next on the ground reporting trip in the members call. Your membership is how we keep the lights on and cover the on the ground reporting. So please, if you're a new subscriber, consider signing up as a paid member. for $5 to $10 a month. That's how we do the investigative and on-the-ground reporting. Please, pretty please, cherry on top, statuscoup.com/join. We take no money from the banks, from the fossil fuckers, big pharma, big real estate, Silicon Valley, the military-industrial complex, or the corporate ghouls purchasing the Democratic and Republican politicians. Our funding comes from you. So statuscoup.com/join. Again, 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific. Now, Obama recently visited the White House to spend some time with his good friend Joe. And he gave a warning to Joe. Headline, The Washington Post. Obama warns of Trump's political strengths in private talk with Biden. Former President Obama had a private lunch with President Biden earlier this summer, voiced concern about Donald Trump's political strengths, including an intensely loyal following, a Trump-friendly conservative media ecosystem, and a polarized country, underlining his worry that Trump could be a more formidable candidate than many Democrats realize. At the lunch in June, Obama promised to do all he could to help the president get reelected, according to two people familiar with the meeting. The commitment was a welcome gesture for the White House at a time when Biden is eager to lock down promises of help from top Democrats, among whom Obama is easily the biggest star, for what is likely to be a hard-fought reelection. Obama was visiting the White House for what Biden aides described as a regular catch-up between the two men. I call bullshit on that. During their lunch, Obama made it clear his concerns were not about Biden's political abilities, but rather a recognition of Trump's iron grip on the Republican Party. So Obama, who, whether we like it or not, is still the star of the Democratic Party. He's the most sought after person for speeches, fundraisers, all that. He's not a dummy politically. He did win twice. And I think he realizes that in 2020, it was less Biden defeating Trump as Trump defeating himself. Of course, he was just indicted yesterday for the January 6th riots and his role in trying to overturn the election. I've read about 3/4 of the indictment. I'm not all the way through. I don't have a lot of time or patience for leftists who pretend that this indictment is criminalizing Donald Trump's free speech. I mean, you're either a moron if you think that, or you're just disingenuous. If you actually read the indictment, I've read most of it. I mean, it's just overwhelming evidence. Donald Trump is not being indicted over January 6th for free speech of lying about the election. He's being indicted over a criminal conspiracy to overturn the election, which the indictment clearly shows he presided atop that conspiracy. But putting that aside, I think that, obviously you got 3 indictments now. You're going to have a 4th one, it looks like, in Georgia. Trump, basically, his money that's being fundraised to his campaign is predominantly going to his legal defense fund, not for a campaign infrastructure, not for digital organizing, not for events, not for the traditional things that money that comes into would go to. It's going to his army of lawyers for what will be 4 different cases. But at the end of the day, you got to realize, and people, don't always remember the numbers, Biden really didn't win by that much in 2020. In Wisconsin, he won by 20,000 votes. In Pennsylvania, he won by 80,000 votes. Michigan, he won by 150,000 votes. These are very reversible. And in 2024, you're not going to have the defining thing, which is why Trump lost in 2020, of COVID. Now, that's not to say COVID is not a thing. Actually, right now, there's a surge going on in America that the media is not reporting on, that the politicians are pretending is not happening, because they have together basically erased COVID. But there is a surge, particularly in the Northeast right now, a lot of cases, and that's without testing for the most part. Hospitalizations are up as well. But COVID is not going to play as much of a defining role in 2024. It's not top of mind to voters. And to me, based on the data, based on the exit polls, that's why Trump lost. His bad mismanagement of COVID. But right now, on the numbers, the economy, people trust Trump more on the economy. You have to be a really, really pathetic president and party if you are losing on the economy to a billionaire whose defining accomplishment as president was to give a massive tax cut to wealthy people. If people trust that guy more on the economy than you kind of deserve what you get. And I don't really want to hear. But Cordell West, Biden is the one that abandoned raising the minimum wage. Biden is the one that abandoned a public option. Biden is the one that promised $2,000 checks, did not deliver. Biden is the one right now not saying a word about the minimum wage and increasing it and how he's actually going to do it. He's not saying anything about expanding healthcare. They're pushing way lower prescription drug prices. Well, it's not benefiting anyone right now because that doesn't take effect until 2026. And we still don't even know what drugs they're talking about. They lowered the price of insulin for people on Medicare. That's good, but what about everybody else? So, at the end of the day, I think Biden is extremely weak right now because fundamentally, as bad as Trump is, and I'm not minimizing Trump, I think what he did with January 6th, the classified documents, what he did in office, is horrible. I do not want Trump to be president again. However, the 40 years of neoliberalism, of technocratic policies, of incremental crumbs, of let's give a tax incentive here, a small tax credit here, temporary child tax credit that we only have for a year and we don't fight to extend it permanently. Chickens are coming home to roost, folks. The chickens are coming home to roost and people are rejecting it. Colin, if we could show the polls from yesterday, I want to show specifically the key factors right now that I think if the election were held today, it's very likely Trump would win in the Electoral College, not the popular vote. If we could show what you highlighted yesterday, the first, whatever order you have them in. If you are there. Hold on. Here we are. Poll number 1. If the election were held today, who would you vote for? If the candidates were Biden, Trump, another candidate, not going to vote. We highlighted this because to me, this is the determining factor. Look at 18 to 29. 9% of those polled that were 18 to 29 say not going to vote if it's Biden versus Trump. Less than 1% of those said they would vote for another candidate. So there goes the whole, spoiler, Cordell West, third party. 9% of young people right now say we just wouldn't vote if our choices are Trump and Biden. Remember, young people are what saved the Democratic Party's ass in the midterm elections. Young people, particularly 18 to 29, came out in very significant numbers, more so than in a normal midterm election. And that's why the Democrats kept the Senate and did a lot better in the House. But as of now, those young people are fleeing Biden. I wonder why. Because there's a fucking climate apocalypse that Biden is responding to by announcing new cooling centers. Literally, record temperatures. You have in Italy, electrical cables melting underneath the ground. In Florida, the Atlantic Ocean is triple digits right now. Coral reefs are bleaching and dying. In Antarctica right now, there are ice patterns that do not happen other than once every 13 billion years. And he gave a speech last week on the climate catastrophe, announcing new cooling centers and more precise weather forecasting for when it's going to be severely hot. Want to show you this too. Trump favorability. Do you see his favorability right now among young people? And, I'm not trying to exclude older people. We have older viewers right now, but I'm just talking about demographics right now. For the election, young people are going to make a big difference. The black vote, Hispanic vote, obviously independents. Look at this. Donald Trump's favorability, 18 to 29. Very favorable, somewhat favorable, 39%. I mean, that should be closer to 10%. 39% of young people right now, somewhat or very favorable. among black voters, 13%. Now, on paper, on the surface, oh, that's pretty bad. Well, this is better than Mitt Romney. 13% of black voters have a favorable opinion of Donald Trump. Hispanic voters, 35%. Very favorable, somewhat favorable. Those numbers should petrify Joe Biden and the Democratic Party. And by the way, it will have a down ballot effect. Senate and congressional races. Then you look at Biden's popularity among those same young people. It's only at 48%. 48%. Very favorable, somewhat favorable. That ain't good. That is not good. Among Hispanic voters, less than 50%. So maybe they should spend a lot more time providing policy, maybe an executive action, maybe delivering some type of substantial victory for workers, young workers, black workers, Hispanic workers, poor white workers, something. Maybe spend more time focusing on that and less time focusing on Cornel West and the grave threat of the third party vote. But they're not doing that. In fact, have you been receiving the fundraising emails over the last 24 hours from Democrats? I have. I'm on every list. Not because I donate to them, but I want to see the messaging. We need to defeat fascism. We need to defeat Trumpism. Give us money. Biden largely won in 2020, not because people were ecstatic about Joe Biden or they were exuberant about a public option or were really, really awestruck by his whole restored the soul of America and all this jazz. They supported Biden because at that point they were going to support a ham sandwich if it meant getting rid of Donald Trump. But because of inflation and the economy really, really backsliding for most working people, whether it's completely fair or not to blame it all on Biden. In fairness, inflation is a global thing. It's not all Biden's fault. I think there was a lot more he could have done to improve it quicker. But people are going to say, I think Trump is detestable, but I'm not voting for this guy again. I think the real threat for Biden right now is similar to what happened with Hillary Clinton in 2016. Contrary to all the BS and fear-mongering about, oh, Jill Stein was the spoiler and she's the reason Hillary lost. I love to show this. Hillary Clinton got 5% less turnout among black voters compared to Obama 4 years before. Yes, that's called depressed turnout. She got 6% less among Latinos compared to Obama 4 years earlier. 6% less compared to Obama among young people age 18 to 29. Right now, you replace Hillary, I'm not a betting man, but what if Biden gets 3% less than his performance in 2020 among black voters? 4% less among his performance among Latinos compared to 2020. 4% less than among young people compared to his performance in 2020. Couple that with, what if more independents break for Trump this time based on the economy or whatever? What if more Republicans come out for Trump? He did get 75 million views, 75 million votes. Maybe there could be an uptick in Republican voters that come out due to the cult and trying to keep him out of prison. Because he is running to stay out of prison. We shall see, but I do not think Obama is lunching at the White House with Biden, pretending that, oh, Joe, it's not that I think your political acumen is weak. I just think Trump is a lot stronger than we think. Obama knows the score. He knows Obama He knows Biden is not exactly in his prime. He knows that all the fairy dust the Democratic Party wants to trickle down about Bidenomics and the great economy, he knows that ain't selling. That's why he's meeting with Biden. And I think Obama could barnstorm the country. I mean, hell, he went out and campaigned more for Hillary Clinton than Hillary Clinton did in the final month or two of 2016. She still lost. So I don't really know if Obama would make a major, major difference for Biden. Let me read super chats. Thank you. Katie Faye Garrett, $10. Lurking and listening. Appreciate that. Kimmy, 99 cents super sticker. Very much appreciate that. As a reminder, we do have the members only call tomorrow. I really, really hope we see some more signups before tomorrow night. Oh,
and also we had Joanne Keene gifted 5 memberships in the YouTube chat as well.
Oh, Joanne. Awesome. Awesome. So we got 5 new members through gifted membership. So Colin, if you could come back and let people know how that works with the gifted membership.
Yeah. So if you're just gifted a membership, it's automatic. I saw a couple of you had received it. Your name will be green and stuff now, and you'll have exclusive emojis. And if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll be able to click. There's a little member section for member videos, and you can see all the stuff we've released. Last week, we actually released a couple exclusive segments from Tina's on the ground reporting for Cop City. So that's just 2 short clips that we never aired. And so we gave it to our members so they got to see it.
Also, if you missed it, we posted a video earlier today. John Farina went. He was on the ground reporting outside the Roosevelt Hotel in New York City, where 150 migrants have been left basically abandoned outside this hotel in boiling heat with no food, no water, no sleeping bags, no access to bathrooms for days. New York City, Eric Adams is doing jack shit to find them shelter and housing. Definitely watch that video. It's infuriating, heartbreaking. Whatever you think of the border crisis, whatever you think, and I know there are some conservatives who watch this, and your answer would be, well, go home. Don't come in the first place. Have a little humanity, for God's sakes. These people are left outside a hotel in the boiling heat with no food and no water and nowhere to even pee or shit. Okay? Be a human. Be a human. Great reporting by John. Please, please, please watch this video, share this video. We'll also have a video tonight or tomorrow. He was out there covering the writers' strike. There was a rally yesterday. Fran Drescher, the actress, spoke. So we'll have that. And we are putting the final touches on Lewis getting back on the ground in East Palestine. So we hope he'll be there within the next 2 weeks. And I am currently working on my next steps for where I'm going to be going on the ground next. But we need you. All of this on the ground reporting, paying John, Lewis, me going on the ground, it all costs money. So if you're a new subscriber here, if you have the funds, obviously, if you don't, totally okay. But if you can't afford it, Status Coup membership is how we fund our investigative and on the ground reporting. On the ground reporting is expensive. Flights, hotels, rent a car, food, equipment, it all adds up. So please, please, if you can, statuscoup.com/join, $5 to $10 a month, $5 a month, 16 cents a day. $10 a month equals 33 cents a day. So please, please, unless I'm missing something, there are not a ton of channels doing anything more than bloviating in their studio about the same bullshit everyone else is. We're actually getting out there on the ground. We'll also have an interview with Shama Sawant tomorrow, update on her fight for rent control in Seattle. We also talked about other things too. So we got a lot going on. Also, what are you doing? Get to the Status Coup store. Get your shirts and swag. We have new merchandise, including the Poisoned States of America shirts that are brand new. We have a capitalism shirt, COP, C-O-P, capitalism shirt in the Status Coup store, and a lot of other swag, including hats, towels, tees, all this good stuff. Another great way for us to gain new revenue, as well as you spreading the coup and spreading the word. And a lot of these shirts are meant not only for you to, sport Status Coup, but they're good conversation starters too. So you could wear your capitalism shirt. You could wear your United Corporations of America shirt, Poison States of America shirt, Got Water shirt. We got a lot of great stuff in the store. So go check it out. That's statuscoup.com/store. Thank you for the tip on, what is that? Rockfin. $2 from Roger. JC from SC. These people are odious. Let's just take a look at New York State. Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stu Cousins. Hold on. Let's just take a look. Andrea Stu Cousins authored and passed the bill along with Speaker of Assembly Carl Heastie, passed the bill raising their pay from $110,000 to $142,000, and didn't even bother to attach an amendment that raises the minimum wage to what it needs to be, $50 an hour, while remaining number one in income inequality. Yep, sounds like New York State Democrats to me. Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. And thank you again, Joanne, for the 5 gifted Status Coup memberships. Thank you to Richard Wolff for joining us today. We'll be back at it tomorrow. Hope to see as many of you as possible, if you're a Status Coup member, on the members call tomorrow night. Again, 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific. You will get the link to your email shortly before the call. It's a Zoom link. You don't have to be on camera. You could just listen if you don't want to be on camera. And this applies also to Status Coup YouTube members and patrons. You'll all get the link. Thanks for watching. See you back here.